Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Todd with the Fort Worth Public Library, and welcome to Just a Dab. Today, we'll be painting a dandelion. This elementary art video tutorial goes with our Just a Dab art kits, but you can still participate at home if you have a few simple things. We're going to use a few tools to put paint on the paper. We're going to use a sponge, cotton swabs, and a small flat paintbrush. The paint we are using is washable tempera paint. To allow us to get the most out of our paint, I recommend using a flat paint palette or plastic plate. Only put out a few drops at a time, that way you use only what is needed. That will help make a small amount of paint last us through 8 paintings. Our main paint colors today are green, yellow, white, and black. We're going to do this in layers. So that means we'll paint the background first and then add our flowers and grass blades. Step 1 is to paint the background. Our background today is 2 colors, green and gray. Let's start by getting our sponge damp. I'm going to put it in my water, but then I'm going to squeeze it out so it doesn't drip. Now I'm going to make a strong diagonal line with the sponge. Dip one corner of your sponge in your black and white paint and gently mix it together. Now that I've done that, I'm drawing the edge of my sidewalk by dragging the sponge with the gray paint on the corner across the page. When we're doing this part, it's okay for the edges to be a little darker than the main sidewalk, but we want to paint the main body of it a light to medium gray. If we go darker with our sidewalk, it's going to be tough to see our dandelion clearly. Our second gray line on the page is going to be the crack where our dandelion is going to grow. When you're done filling in your sidewalk with gray paint, it's time to rinse our sponge just a little bit, squeeze it out again, and start at the base for the grass. We're going to pick a new corner of the sponge, make sure the sponge is damp but not dripping, and pick up some green paint. Smear this all across the green grass side of the paper in big bold strokes. When you get to the edge of the sidewalk, go a little slower and be more careful. Drag your sponge in a parallel line next to the sidewalk, but I don't quite let mine touch. I want a little light in between them to give some more contrast. Don't worry if yours doesn't look like mine. It's art, and there's no wrong way to do it. When you're done, rinse out your sponge. Once your background is all done, it's time to wait for it to dry. I recommend reading the picture book Finding Wild, written by Megan Wagner-Lloyd and illustrated by Abigail Halpin to pass the time. It should take about 5 minutes to dry, but if it isn't ready after 5 minutes, set a timer for a few more minutes and come back to it. Okay, now that your background is totally dry, it's time to add our dandelions. We're going to do this in a few layers because we're adding yellow paint over the top of the darker colors we chose for the background. Pick a spot along the shorter diagonal sidewalk line you painted with your sponge. We're going to pick up a Q-tip and dip it in some bright yellow paint. We're going to come in from the outside edge of our flower and a little push like this. Keep going around. Pick up another drop or 2 of yellow paint as you need it and put in some more petals. While the first layer of our main dandelion dries, I think I'd like to add in another one. Happy little dandelions. Same thing as before. In case you'd rather do this with your brush, you can by gently using the thin side of your brush and pulling towards the center. I used a cotton swab. So you're going to want to keep going and keep painting until you're happy with that first layer. I'm adding layers of petals because a dandelion is a happy yellow puff of many layers. Now that the flowers are drying, let's add the stems. Get some green paint on your brush. We'll use the thin side of the brush and start down in the crack near the roots and sweep upwards toward our flower in a low curve. I I'm using a smaller curved line here to indicate the stem because I'm looking down at it. The sweeping motion also helps me to stop the green paint before it gets up into my flower. I'll add some grass later, so even if you make a mistake, it's easy to fix. Dandelions have big jaggedy leaves, so let's put a couple of those in. I'm going to put a little drop of white in with my green and pick up both colors, one on each side of my brush. This will give us some light and some different shades of green to work with. I'm using my brush to make a little sweeping motion with the big side of it, and I will add the rough triangular edges of the leaves. The center of each leaf has a thicker piece. In the center, it's called a midrib, and that holds it up. So let's just curve that along right here. If you have trouble making these shapes like I did, flip the paper over. Move your paper around so you can more easily get what you need. Be gentle with your hands and try not to touch the wet spots. Let the brush do the work. Keep working on your flowers until they look done. Now for my final touch, I'm going to add some grass blades here along the edge of the sidewalk. Oh, don't worry if yours doesn't look like mine. It's art, and there's no one right way to do it. We're all done! Thanks so much for joining me today. Don't forget to wash out your brush, palette, and sponge and let them air dry so they're ready for next time.